Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of A Happy Moment. My name is Dan. I'm glad to have you with us today. And today we have a very special guest on the show. She is the author of Midlife Magic. Please welcome JoAnn Fawcett. Hey, JoAnn.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great, JoAnn. How about yourself?
I'm well. It's lovely here in Portland, Oregon. It was raining yesterday. Today it's sunny, so it's good. It's all good, and the
Hey,
cat's
have
quiet, so it's all good.
out there in Oregon, I hear there's a lot of Sasquatch. Have you ever seen one?
I have never, but I have no doubt there are plenty. I know there's some in Washington, but I'm sure there's plenty here in Oregon, especially in the forests. So,
Okay.
well, I saw one. Okay, I saw one Sunday at a restaurant. There were a couple of them hanging around, but they were very quiet and still.
Okay. Yeah, if I was a Sasquatch, I'd probably be quiet in front of people too.
Yeah. It was just standing still. Yeah.
JoAnn has lived through some interesting situations, and she's experienced uh, some fascinating things. But before we get into that, JoAnn, I think it's best if maybe we start at the beginning. And would you like to
Okay.
tell us a little about yourself?
Sure. I just turned 70, had a big fun birthday weekend. I have a grown daughter and three grandchildren. I have one cat. I've been a bookkeeper for over 40 years. I am now the author of two books and living my best life. So, yes,
Oh,
and I've had lots of weird and strange experiences. So, but it's all good.
okay. What's your cat's name?
My cat's name is Winston. So, after Churchill.
Oh, okay.
Very, very British in this household.
Okay, I was gonna say, are you a history buff?
Well, yes, but I also am at least half British, English, everything from the British Isles. So, and I've been to England 5 times, so I love British stuff. So, you know, so yeah.
Okay.
And his nickname from the people that I got him from, they were calling him Whiny, so I just changed it to Winston. It suits him.
Okay. No,
So,
I like Winston. That's a good name. It
yeah,
sounds
yeah,
very very classic. Makes
it
him
is.
sound
And
like
he has
he's
he's a tuxedo cat, so he looks very formal. So,
JoAnn. You've undergone a few I guess transformational phases in your life.
I
Um,
have.
you've been through quite a bit, and I understand that you've been through 7 marriages.
Yes. 7 marriages, five. Well, I was a Mormon for 30 years, so five of them were to Mormons. Two of them were not. The second one committed suicide, and he's the father of my daughter. And the last one, I divorced. Well, it's been over a year. The divorce has been final for over a year. We were together like 25 years, and he's in prison. So that was
Oh,
an
geez.
interesting experience in itself. But so yeah, I've been through 7 very rocky marriages.
Oh, I'm not that familiar with the Mormon faith. Um,
Uh,
is is marriage in there? Is Do you have like much of a say in that?
you do, but and I also grew up in the 50s, and my parents were not Mormons. But I grew up in the era where you're watching Leave It to Beaver and stuff, and everybody on TV is a happy little family, and everything's rosy, and that's all I ever wanted. My parents were not Mormon, but in the church, the goal is to find your soulmate and get married and have lots of kids and live happily ever after. But what they don't teach you necessarily is what you should be talking about before you get married, and really diving deep into, are we on the same page about the many important things that whether you're in a church together or not. Couples should be discussing certain things, in my opinion, before they dive into marriage or even living together. But I didn't. In the church, you're not allowed to have sex before marriage. You're not supposed to get married or live together before marriage. So we courted quickly, got married, and I just assumed, well, I'm marrying somebody in the same church. We're going to parent the same way. We're going to da 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 da, do believe in all these things together the same way, and that just wasn't the case. And I would say like all of my Mormon husbands were abusive in some way, physical, emotional, financial. So I did not find the good Mormon husband that I was looking for. And I
Mm.
left the church anyway after 30 years, so it doesn't really matter now. I mean, that's not on my radar, but they do want you to get married and, raise this family in the church and live happily ever after. That just, I just didn't pick the right men, and I didn't look at the I didn't see the red flag soon enough, and I rushed into rushed into it too many times. So yeah, don't do that. Don't do that, anybody.
No. So was there a sort of straw that broke the camel's back that caused you to leave the Mormon church?
No, not really, because I never saw it as a cult. I wouldn't join it now, but I didn't have any traumatic experiences with the church itself. It was just the men that I married, and especially because they teach you that, well, they teach you, number one, that husband and wife are supposed to be helpmates. So in my mind, that's equal. But they kind of, well, the man is the head of the household in the Mormon faith, and so the husbands I married, it's like lorded that over you. It's like, well, I'm in charge. You got to do what I say. And it's like, what about equal partnership, helpmate stuff? And that never seemed to. They didn't care. Um, and I probably, the camel that broke, there was probably a camel that broke the straw that broke the camel's back in each of the marriages. Now for the church, it was never a traumatic thing. But when I met number 7 and he's in prison, and when you're a Mormon, if you're an active Mormon, you're doing church service all week long, which is fine. But you're also at church half a day on Sunday, because at some point, probably when gas prices were, way high, many years ago, like when my daughter was a toddler, and she's, anyway, she's older than you, I think. I'm pretty sure. Anyway, years ago when gas prices are high, you used to go to church. There were a couple meetings during the week. Then you'd go for Sunday school in the morning on Sunday, and then there was an afternoon service. Well, they combined it all. So now you're spending half a day at church. And if you're okay with that, you're okay with that. But when I met the guy in prison, I realized, well, he's really interesting and I really want to get to know him. And if I visit him, well, I could visit him on other days, but it's like, I'd rather visit him than spend half a day in church. And so I just decided to stop going. And for me, it was as simple as that. And I just realized I didn't need it. And we started talking about different spiritual things. And I started learning a bunch of other spiritual things. It's like, oh, there's life outside the Mormon church, and there's some cool things I want to pursue. And so I just left. And my spiritual path now is totally different than it was then. And it's perfect for me now. So yeah.
Uh, you said number 7, he was already in prison when you first met him?
Yes, he got falsely accused of masterminding a murder in the early 80s, and the
Oh,
kids that did it said he was in charge of it and helped them dump the body, which none of that's true. I mean, there was somebody that died. The kids that did it, one of them got full immunity for testifying against him, and one of them is serving 25 to life because he was 17, but I think he was tried as an adult. My ex got life without parole because he was the adult. Um, that being aside, he'd already been in prison. When did I meet him? I met him towards the later 90s. So he'd been in prison almost 15 years by the time I'd met him. And my roommate came home one day and said, oh, I met this really interesting guy, and her husband was in prison, and he's visiting his mom. He's really smart, he's really nice, he's a friend of my husband's. Do you want to meet him? It's like, sure, a smart boyfriend would be a nice change. He sounds really interesting. So we started writing, and he was interesting. And then I met him in person a couple months later, and we just hit it off. um, I didn't know until, we'd already been married 20 something years, that he's a narcissist. But that aside, he introduced me to some really cool topics, so
and
that have nothing
he's
to do
still
with
in
narcissism. But yeah,
he's still in prison now?
he's still in prison. He has a life without parole sentence, so I doubt he'll ever get out. And he's been there, almost 40 years, and he's a little older than I am. So I think he just turned 71 this year. So
Okay.
yeah,
And he's the one that introduced you to these, uh, I guess,
yeah.
mystical things, or however you want to
He
describe
did.
them?
He well, he and his father, I mean, were both career military, and they were in military intelligence. So they were involved a lot with the reality of space, the military going into space and space travel and aliens coming here and, all that realm. And so I got to learn a lot about the military's involvement with aliens, what he could tell me. And he also introduced me to the topic of the fairy realm, which totally fascinated me, and that's become an important part of my life. And also, I mean, I'd already had experiences with paranormal before I met him, but I forgot about him. And so then when I started exploring certain places, historical and magical, then I got back in touch with, oh, I can see a ghost. I can feel the ghost. This is really cool. I was going to say, was there one more thing? Oh, and he introduced me to the topic of witchcraft, and what I practice is a very positive, create your best life type of thing. I don't do anything dark. So, it's just very magical, and it really helps keep me on a lovely, positive path. So, yeah. So yes, he introduced me to those topics, which I will be forever grateful. But he turned out to be a terrible husband. So,
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Uh, I
so
guess
am I. But yeah, but
I
it's
guess
okay.
at least he was good for something, introducing you to these things.
Well, it's. I look at all my exes, and even the one that died. They were all teachers. So I don't sit and wallow around in self pity and whatever. And I caused my daughter a lot of stress because she had a bunch of terrible stepdads. But I've moved during COVID. I moved from California to Oregon, and we've been able to heal a lot of that. We've done a lot of talking and stuff, and she kind of helped me with my first book, and she was right by my side when I was writing the second book. So the other thing, and I shouldn't be so nonchalant, but the other thing I got out of the latest X, was I just wrote what I think is a best. I mean, it was a bestseller. It got to Amazon bestseller status in many places. But anyway, I wrote a really good book about the journey and the healing part of that, and how I hope to help other people. But that aside, he's not crazy about it, but it was necessary for my healing. So yeah.
Okay. Uh, you mentioned having several paranormal experiences. Would you like to
Mm-hmm.
share?
Sure. When I imagine I was in my 20s, and I was married to husband number 3, who was a funeral director. And he mostly, the company he worked for had, like, sometimes you have, okay, these are the Catholics, and they have their funerals, and he organized Mormon funerals. So that, because, that's what he was. And, the first time when I used to sing at several of the funerals that he was directing, but I also, one time, he had to transport an elderly lady's body who had passed from Southern California to Northern California. So I drove with him in the van up to Northern California, and she had a little graveside service, and I think 2 or 3 of her elderly relatives were there. And so he's standing there talking, and I'm kind of listening, but I could feel this lovely, sweet spirit standing next to me. And I'm thinking, oh, that's the woman who died. She's right here watching. And one thing about the Mormon Church, they do teach you that. Well, number one, they teach you that the spirit usually hangs about for 3 days before it moves on, and they also teach you, basically the spirit world is just kind of right there anyway. Just on the other side of the veil, or, I mean, to me, it's just in another dimension. But so, to realize that her spirit was right there didn't scare me. She wasn't poking me. She wasn't trying to scare me. It wasn't a Halloween thing. But anyway, it was really lovely. And then probably a couple years later, we moved to Ohio, and he wasn't a funeral director, but his sister's mother-in-law passed while we lived there. And I sang at her funeral. So I'm at the front of the chapel, but I could sense that she was hanging about in the top left corner of near the ceiling, and looking down on the service, because she was very well loved in the community and stuff. So that was really cool. And then I forgot about it, I forgot about it. And then years later, when I met number 7, I had a little newspaper for a while, and I would go research places that, cool places to visit, blah, blah, blah. And so there is an aircraft carrier, decommissioned aircraft carrier, in the Oakland the bay near Oakland. It's called the Alameda Naval Air Station. That's what it used to be. So now it's a bunch of businesses and Navy Reserve, but they have this decommissioned aircraft carrier, which is cool. It had great World War II history. Doolittle's raid to Japan was off of that ship. But it's really famous for the ghosts that hang about there. And some of them died on the ship during their Navy career. Some just have heard about it and they want to go hang out there. So I've been there several times, but I've been there with two different psychics. And the first time I was there, it was as the tourists, because she was a docent. So the tourists were gone for the day, and we're walking about and she's showing me everything. And it's like, there's this one hallway that felt so cold, and the walls, they probably weren't wet, but they felt wet, but just kind of a ooh. And then you walk in the forecastle where the anchor is and the chains and stuff, and nothing there. But we walked up this ladder. She's going to go into like a bunk room for the sailors. And as I get to the top of this ladder, this spirit just peeks out at me behind this column. And I can feel their spirit. I can sense the energy. I can see a shadow. I can't see what they look like as a person. I wouldn't see you. But both of my psychic friends can. But she was in the other room. It's like, oh, well, this is cool. Hello. And I just had a little conversation with him. Not that I could hear words back, but I wanted him to know that I was friendly and wasn't there to do him any harm. So that was very exciting for me. We went to, and when I went with her, the ship was in various stages of being like restored and able to have tourists. So, different rooms would open up at different times. But we went into the chapel, which was still full of boxes. And there was a little guy scared, hiding behind some boxes. And, we just told him, we're just here. We're friendly. We're here. Don't be afraid. And I don't know whether he needed to cross over or not, but we just gave him his space. But, it was very clear that he was there. And the ship, I know about it. It's not publicly well known unless people have heard my UFO talks, but the ship had some negative alien activity on it, at least in the 70s. And there was a bit of a conflict, and humans and aliens died. So my husband at the time, he said, well, let me know what kind of feeling you get when you go by the medical bay, which is right across the hall from the chapel. And so we couldn't go in there because it hadn't been cleaned up for tourists. But just as we get near it, it's like, ooh, really negative energy. And I was like, oh my gosh, ew. And aliens had been put in there to study, or I don't know if they were already dead or they were trying to help them. I don't know, but there were bad aliens in there. So negative energy. The next time I went, it was fine. It was all cleared out, but it was weird. And it was just interesting to have positive and negative energy throughout the ship. Now there's some fun things because, I don't know if adults, but at least like scouts and stuff, youth groups can go there and spend the night, and the docents will tell them ghost stories all night, and it's really fun. And that's why they go. But, and there's stories of one of the captains going across a catwalk, and where the woman's restroom is in the main hangar bay, it used to be an engine room. So sometimes women have reported when they're in the restroom, they feel like somebody's watching them. Well, there's a couple of sailors that had worked in there and they like to watch. I didn't feel any of that, but back then I was using 35 millimeter cameras with black and white film that you had to process. And so I would take pictures like just outside of the restroom. I wasn't going to take pictures in the restroom, but you can see the disruption of energy, or the energy, it looks different if you've seen photos, when they're processed from real film. And so I could just see the shimmery. It's like, okay, they're there. Hello, that's cool. But you couldn't, it clearly, I couldn't see that when I was there, but I could feel them. And it showed up when I took the pictures. And also because my father-in-law had experiences there, he was in the Air Force, but he was probably a major by then. I think he was a major by then, but he also liaisoned with Admiral Nimitz, who was stationed at Alameda, and they would have meetings and do things. Anyway, so every time I'd go to the Hornet with a psychic friend, his spirit would be there with me, especially when I went on the flight deck. So I could feel him. And then the psychics, both of them said, your father-in-law is standing right there. I go, yeah, I know. I could tell. It's really cool. I just love it. He's a good friend of mine now. I never met him when he was alive. He died like 6 months before I met his son, but we've had many communications and many, like when I used to go give UFO talks, he would stand right by me or stand right behind me. He'd stand behind my left shoulder and I could tell he was there. So it's just, and he's come to me and talked to me through psychics and stuff who, I'm really proud of you. Just keep saying the truth, keep telling the truth. And that was very, and that was long before. Now I can talk to him regularly, but, it was really cool. I would have liked to have known him when he was alive, but let's see, any more on the Hornet? Oh yeah, one of the times I was there, I have a British friend. She's now passed, but very gifted trance medium and stuff. And she worked with a lot of spirits. We went on the ship together after the medical bay had been cleared out, and we were down another hallway. I don't even know where we were, but all of a sudden there was somebody there, and he wasn't happy. He had died on the ship because of an alien attack, and she was just trying to help him calm down and stuff, and he was trying to take her over, and I was going to try and calm her down. Not her, she wasn't upset, but I was just going to try and how you try to hug somebody just to help them calm down. She said, "No, don't touch me." But I could see her face change as he was talking through her, and she was able to call his father from the other side to help him, walk through the light, or go transition, go with your dad, go to the other side, and whatever you want to call it. But so thankfully he was able to cross over and transition, and because he was so angry because he'd been dead and he really hadn't understood what it was that he didn't understand his death, and it was horrible death, and he didn't know what it's like. He would have never seen an alien before. They're not going to tell you before you get stationed on your ship, "Oh, we're going to see aliens today." So he died a horrible death, and he was still angry after he had died. And, and that's, I talked to my mom. I work through a channeling medium every couple weeks, and I've talked to several of my relatives, but I've talked to my mom, whose high school boyfriend was in the Navy during World War II, and he was in the Pacific campaign, and he got captured by the Japanese and died a horrible death. And he's still angry. And he's been dead, a long time. And he's still very angry. And they've met up, so maybe she's helping calm that a little bit. And I think he's starting to work through it. But just because you're dead doesn't mean you all of a sudden let go of everything that you're feeling. And you can move past it and work through it. But a lot of things that are with you, especially energy and emotions, are still with you when you go. Now, let's see. When I've been to England, and just interrupt me if you need to, but when I've been to England,
I do have a question.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So some of the spirits now, like with your father-in-law, there's an obvious connection there. But for
Right.
other ones, like the first one you saw, the older lady, do you have any theories about why you were able to see these spirits?
Well, and
Like,
again, I didn't see. Well, sometimes I just see shadows. With her, I could just feel it. I
mhm.
just think it's because maybe she knew I'd be receptive and not scared by it, and I'd already, by then I was in my I'd already been a member of the church for a long time, so the spirit world didn't scare me, and it just didn't scare me, so it was pretty cool.
Okay.
Yeah. So I just think it was, she wanted to be there because I do think spirits tend to hang about after they're gone to see who comes to their funeral, or just, it's just like a theory, but she just wanted to see her family, and yeah, and just enjoy the service. And she was probably really happy that I could tell that she was there because nobody else knew it. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your story.
Oh,
That
no,
you.
no, no. I was going to
Okay.
say, well, I've been to England several times, and especially I was able to stay and visit with my English friend. And we would go to castles and manor houses, a lot of historical places. And she used to live near Dover Castle, the White Cliffs of Dover and all that stuff. And we walked around, and then we went into the keep where the throne room is and stuff. And you walk up this huge staircase, excuse me, and we went into this room that was like probably for the centuries, the guards and stuff who would, we'll stay here. If the king needs us, we're right next door to the throne room. And she's standing in a window. I'm standing in the door taking pictures, as every good tourist will do. And all of a sudden there's this blue energetic light just shoots through me. It's like I guess the king needs him, because it was definitely a ghost and it was blue, and we both saw it, and it's like, wow, that was really amazing. Usually it's not that dramatic. We went into the throne room, and it was kind of a different experience because I immediately just felt this powerful energy, deja vu thing, like that I had had a past life in that castle, in that throne room. It's like, not that I was the queen or anybody super important, but I worked at court. I wasn't a kitchen maid. I worked at court somehow, but because I was allowed to be in the throne room. So it's like, okay, this is really cool. This is really powerful. But we'd go in other rooms, and my friend could see, oh, there's a little boy playing with his ball, and da da da, and so that was lovely because she was better at it than I was. But we went to down in there's tunnels under Dover Castle, and they've been there for a very long time. So different times, they were used. I don't know if they were used to hide or maybe to shoot from, but like during World War II, part of it was a hospital, part of it was a communication center, and so for the tourist attraction aspect of it, for the hospital, they have it all done up so that you can see what it would have looked like back during the World War II. And they would have sounds of like people talking and whatever, and sometimes they'd have smells. So it's like, but that got a little overpowering. You don't want to smell the surgery theater or dead bodies and diseased limbs and things like that. But we could go around it, and the docent, I guess we had asked him, well, have you ever seen anything or felt anything in here? And he goes, well, yes. And so we were very excited to talk to him. And then we get to the surgery theater, and we're standing, like the head of the operating table, and we're both going, oh, somebody's in here. And probably somebody who was on the operating table. And we get out of that part of it, and the guy's going, did you see anything? What'd you do? Well, okay, somebody was in here. It wasn't very pleasant, but somebody was definitely still there. And so, then everyone's, what are you talking about? And it's like, oh, nothing. But I've been on, when I was on the Hornet, my English friend and I, we could both see somebody standing in the next room. And I'm not sure if that was a torpedo bay. We're just going to go with that because I think it was, but I don't know. Something, and you didn't normally go in there. And so we're chatting about, okay, somebody's over there, and there's this dad with his two little boys. It's like, what are you talking about? Oh, nothing. We don't want to scare your little boys because that would probably freak them out. They weren't old enough to, I don't think that they would get excited about knowing there's a ghost in the other room. But even, it's funny because we went to a couple of smaller forts. There's not a ring, but there's several forts right along the southeastern coast of England to help guard the coast against France or other countries back in the day. And one is the fancy one where whoever was in charge of those forts would stay. So that was just a little household one. There's another one closer to town that was very military, and it was small. And that was lovely, but we went in the basement level where the holes for the arrows and things or guns, those narrow slits. So, you'd shoot out of those.
Yeah.
And there's also a dungeon, like even under that level. And we're standing there, and she's going, oh, we got to go. Somebody's not very happy. He wants us to leave. And you can feel the change in the energy. I don't know if you've had that experience, but you can tell if it's a happy ghost or a not so happy ghost, or if they have evil intentions or not. So, if they're fun. But for at least the energy for me is very different. And yeah, so we left. We heed the warning and we leave. And then another time we were at a place called Blickling Hall, which is, I don't remember who owned it, but Anne Boleyn was born there. Her father's family may have owned it for a short period of time. And we encountered a spirit in like the office. And so that was quite lovely. We could see the shimmery stuff as we were taking pictures, and other people, and we could see this light that just wasn't naturally there. And people, what are you seeing? What's going on? It's like, oh, nothing. And then we had been upstairs, and we were going downstairs because that's how you get to the next part on this self-guided tour. And my friend's going, oh, there's some lady running downstairs, and she's very surprised that I can see her. And she shouldn't have been, I think it was a servant staircase, but she had been somewhere where she should not have been, probably having some little rendezvous. And she's racing down the stairs because she's got to get out of there. And she's seen now by a live person. so that was very interesting. And then at that same manor house, we went through the formal gardens, and there's a little sign for the secret garden. And there's a whole little walled in garden I don't think at the time, because it was probably October, that's usually when I used to go, there weren't a lot of flowers, but we just sat there and it was definitely a fairy garden because you could just feel the energy shift and the vortex was just, it's like, oh, I just wanted to sit there forever because the fairy presence was so strong there. And it's like, I don't know that anybody hardly ever comes in here, but they were sure happy that I'd gone, that we had gone in there because it was just so delightful to sit and talk to them. And I couldn't see them, but you can feel it so strongly. And
Yeah.
I love going places where I can feel the fairies and feel the ghosts. And one of the things, and I was trying to think if there were any other ghosty things, but I mean, I've also been in the old California governor's mansion, and there's some ghosts in there. So there's ghosts so many places, but and even like my first trip to England, another friend was with me, and we went to Warwick Castle, typical medieval castle, now just owned by, I mean, it's now owned by a national historic thing, but it used to be owned by a family. And so I think it probably started out with, there's some military, you've got your towers and your walls and all that good stuff, but it's like a big family home, and then your friends would come for the weekend and you have big parties and blah, blah, blah. But I remember there's this great hall there, and it's just huge and a big fireplace. And if you're up on the level where the bedrooms are, then there's a walkway between like the bedrooms to over this side, but the balcony overlooks this great hall. Now, when he was young, like 6 or 7 or whatever, his family lived in England because his dad was stationed at one of the Air Force bases there. And he and his little friend had ridden their ponies from wherever they lived. They lived near Banbury. So, a few hours away, they rode their ponies to work. Now, by car, it's not that far, but back in the 60s, it was far and there was no freeway and you're riding across fields and now there's a blizzard. And so they made it somehow to this castle and the people brought them in and let them bring their pony in and warm up by the fire. So, I heard a lot of that story, so I had to go to Warwick Castle and check it out. Well, when I was there and going along the hallway that overlooks the thing, it's like I knew it's really dark and the tourists can go there, and it's like I could tell there was some fairy energy like right ahead of me. And when I process my pictures, and it's in my first book, you can see the little balls of energy just running along the hallway. It's like, come on, JoAnn, follow us. This is the way to go. This is cool. We're having fun in here. We're playing. And the other thing is, like, I had fairies in California at the house I lived in, and some of them would come with me to England because they wanted to meet new fairy friends, or maybe they had originally come from England hundreds of years before, wanted to go back and see, so I always took some with me, and they had a blast, and that was fun, and we'd have parties every time we'd go someplace, and yeah, so lots of good stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah.
You'd mentioned something a while ago that caught my attention.
Sure.
You mentioned the words alien attack. What's going on
Yes.
here? What's that all about?
Well, there are friendly aliens and there are not friendly. I mean, there are aliens who are not friendly. And I don't like to dwell on them anymore, but especially when my ex was in the military working with all this, they dealt with all kinds, because at least a couple of times that I know of, there were big treaty conferences here on the planet. So you had all kinds of species coming. The first time, there's maybe like 100 species. The next time, 10 years later, there may be 200 species. But not everybody gets along. Not everybody, most of them don't like humans anyway. There are some who would like to take over this planet. And just like the Martian movies from when I was growing up, not everybody's friendly. And when there were often threats against this planet, the militaries around the world would have to band together and deal with it. And there would be space battles. And sometimes the battles were here on the planet because some of the aliens could get here. So it wasn't, and I have great stories of friendly aliens, and well, these are artists, these are scientists, but sometimes it's not wonderful, and it's, not all rosy. And yes, there have been some horrendous battles and some horrendous invasion attempts to take over the planet. And nowadays I say, you hear about all these major terrorist things. A lot of times it's because there's a negative alien species that wants to help take over, or they're working with that government who's started that war, or they riled up some kind of terrorist attack in that mall, or they're behind the kidnapping of all those school children. And, it's not always the humans that are behind all this. And a lot of times, different governments do work with not so nice alien entities because, if we let them kidnap a certain amount, then they'll give us this much technology. And we've gotten a lot of technology from aliens, good or bad, but sometimes it's at the cost of human lives. And sometimes when there's natural disasters like a huge tsunami and lots of people go missing, it's not because they were totally washed out to sea. It might have been because they were taken somewhere else. So there's a lot of
Okay.
not so great alien activity. I like to talk about the friendly stuff now.
And you've also mentioned that you've done some speaking on the topics of UFOs and extraterrestrials.
Yeah, for
Like,
about, I was going to say, I had my first booth at a UFO conference in the California Bay Area in 2005. I went to my first conference in 2004 after he'd started telling me a little bit. And then by the next year, I had enough so I could have a booth and I could talk intelligently about this stuff. And then and then I started getting on some radio shows. I was going to say there was the internet by then, but people weren't doing as a lot of they weren't. I didn't even know podcasts existed, so you were getting a lot of radio shows. So I was starting to do that, and then in 2007, I got to go to England for my first time to give my first talks, and I went back to that conference 4 or 5 times. And I spoke at a few other conferences in England, but I spoke at several around the United States. And I don't think I got into Canada, but several in the United States, Philadelphia, the San Francisco Bay Area, New Mexico, Washington, several places. I loved it. And then I would talk about alien species. I would talk about my ex's missions that he'd been involved with that he could tell me about. And so, here you have this whole new perspective that people were not talking about because most of them were not speaking from a military standpoint, but he had the opportunity, I guess. There's also was an international security agency that was outside the realm. It was founded by the United Nations, so it was outside the realm of the U.S. military. So when he was working for them, or if he didn't talk about his direct contact with the U.S. military stuff, he could talk about it. But he was always in contact with, people were always monitoring what we were saying. So we didn't say anything that, was going to get him in federal military prison or me in prison. He was very careful about that. But he would write reports about the different missions and the different aliens, and then I would go speak. So for maybe 10 years, I had plenty of stuff to talk about, and I got invited, not all the time, but I got invited to several conferences or several, some MUFON groups and just some other groups. So it was great. And I started a nonprofit to, use that as an educational, platform to share this information. And I'm still selling the reports, but I've kind of disbanded the nonprofit because I've got too many other things going on and I don't live in California anymore and I'm not married to him anymore. So I don't necessarily want to be his spokesperson anymore, but I like to share about the topic. And he's just part of that. But yeah, so I did spend going to a lot of conferences and having a lot of booths and, talking to a lot of people. And I loved it. So, for me, it's educational and I like to teach people stuff. So. Yeah.
as far as like the friendly aliens, do you have is there a specific alien race that I guess you're especially fond of?
Yes. Well, there's a couple. There's a couple of cat species that I know of, and they all come from space. Some of them a few of them live here now, but there is a cat species he encountered when he was on a space mission in 1979, I think. But they're very tall, and their arms, they've got, skin. So it looks like when they outstretch their arms, it looks like they have wings because they can fly. Their mustache is kind of thick. Well, what we would think would be their mustache, but they can sing and they can do telepathy. They'll, communicate with, ESP and stuff. And they like to dye their fur different colors and different, designs and things. And so they're really cool. They're a cat species, but they almost remind me of, what I would think Chewbacca looked like, but I could be totally wrong. But they're very friendly, and they can do that Spock mind meld thing. But their home world is like a big sphere just sitting out in space somewhere, and everything else goes past it. It doesn't go anywhere. It's not like it's orbiting anything, but they have this whole world inside this sphere, and it's pretty cool. And after that mission, 4 of them came back to Earth with my ex, and there's a place off of a South American country where there's a whole, like, I don't know if it's an island or whatever, but there's several alien embassies there. So that's where they hang out. And
Okay.
let's see, the other cat species looks like a black panther. So I don't know exactly where they live, but they look like a panther. But if they're standing upright and if they're in a hooded cloak, they could look like a human because they could kind of walk like a human, but they've got a tail and they have litters of kittens. But they're very, they can defend themselves, but they don't kidnap humans, and they're not looking to have a fight. They're scientists and they're archaeologists and scientists and all kinds of, they're explorers. And the one that I like the most, Contessa Leona, she would come to Earth to do archaeological digs to see if her species had visited that part of the planet before. So sometimes aliens just come here for science and exploration. Some come for vacation. They're not all coming here for negative things. But she would try to go to different places and have different archaeological digs and see, okay, well, have our people been here? And I don't know how many places she discovered that her people had been to, but there's a place in Turkey, the Göbekli Tepe temple site. I think it's a very spiritual site, but there's also very clearly some round areas that were landing spots for different alien species. And I've seen pictures of carvings of different animals. It's like, okay, this could be where the dogs landed, and this could be where the not lizards, the reptilian types landed, and over here there would have been cats landing. So all and there's many different kinds of species that have come here, and there's a cool dog species. It's kind of like a hound dog, and they're just commercial. They export commodities to space, chocolate and bling and all kinds of things that the aliens want. And they were allowed to set up a base in Australia after a 1961 conference. And they've been coming to Earth for thousands of years. They have great medical knowledge, and they've been very friendly to humans. They never kidnap anybody. They won't transport kidnapped victims. They can defend themselves because they're merchants. So they will defend the merchant fleet who's, trying to, you got to protect against pirates, whether you're in space or in the ocean. So I've heard stories about them, and they're very smart. And not that she's not their leader, but there was one that was in charge of their group down in Australia. Okay, so that's a female, and she's talking about her kids and stuff, and litters of puppies, and they sound delightful, and they're all very smart and communicate and want to work with us and help us. If we could, there is a ban on open communication between civilians and aliens, so that's why one of the reasons why they can't. They would love to have all of us humans as their customers, selling us stuff. But if there's great, if Hershey and Nestle and everybody else is doing so well, it might be because the aliens are buying a lot of chocolate. So yeah. Yeah, they like silks, they like chocolate, they like Rolex watches. As silly as it sounds.
With all the different alien races that visit our planet, planet Earth must be pretty far behind the rest of the planets as far as technology.
Just because the fact that we're younger, humans are way younger than any of the alien species. Yeah, so I would definitely admit we are way behind in technology. And there's one other species I would be remiss if I didn't mention them, because they're one of my favorites. If you've ever watched the movie Jurassic World, because I think it's not that it's better than Jurassic Park, but it looks more like them. The velociraptors in Jurassic World, There is a species, I mean, there's several raptor species, but there's a species of aliens that started out as dinosaurs way back when, they started out on this planet. They still look like dinosaurs to this day. Most of them left the planet to colonize space. They have several, they came back, but there are several bases here on this planet, but they have been working with our military since 1952. And I just love, my ex used to talk about them the most because he worked with them. He and his dad worked with them regularly. They can, the more higher up you are, you can have operations so that you can speak, or they can speak human languages. And many of them know many languages. They're highly educated. They're very family oriented. They're run by a female, and they have an empress at the top of their government, but they have a senate and they have witches, and they put on 8-hour operas, and they love art and all kinds of things. But this is their mother world, and they do not pollute it. And they know how to do their technology elsewhere and then bring it here what they need. They build their bases underground so that they're not having to build monstrosity buildings and ruining the environment on top of the ground. But they're, and they freely admit they steal or they borrow technology maybe from other species because they don't want to necessarily take the time to invent it themselves, but they're very good at it. They can use computers, they'll talk to it or they'll just think it, and the computer does what so because they've got sharp claws at the end of their appendages. And they can also they have a very strong military, and they have very sharp claws, and they could gut you in a second if you're their enemy. But they're the coolest species, and their leather is beautiful colors, and they're magical, and they're wonderful, and I just love them. So I know I haven't met them, but I would love to sit down for tea with them. So,
How
that's my big dream.
How far away do you think we are from, I guess, aliens being fully exposed on the planet? Like, we hear about it every now and again in the media, and like last year we had there were Senate hearings on UFOs. So I think we're getting closer, but
well, we're getting closer. But here's the thing, and I tell you, before COVID happened, and COVID was a totally engineered thing, and I'm sure aliens were involved. But before COVID happened, there were several groups who were really on the brink of pushing disclosure because they're ready to be open with us. Right now, because of COVID and certain things, the only way they could really expose themselves is if they had to leap in and help us in a military situation, and then it would be really ugly. And, then, it's the bad aliens are helping fight, da, 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 da. But they do help us. I mean, they help us in space and on this planet when there's an enemy that needs to be helped or dealt with. But, there's still, there's a lot of people on this planet who would be totally freaked out. Now, there's a lot, and those of us who have been listening to this and thinking about it for years, it probably wouldn't freak us out so much because we've been hoping for it for a long time. The military keeps saying, oh, the people can't handle it. And I'm sure there's people in, remote areas that probably couldn't. But again, it's like the aliens have been here, many species originated here. Species have been coming and visiting the Native American tribes and, groups forever, a long time before the white man was in the United States. So it's not, and there's pictures of alien visitations for thousands of years in the caves and stuff. So it's not like people don't acknowledge that they've been coming here. How close are we? I don't know. Somebody had asked my ex to give me a timeline of, when these different conferences have happened and when you think disclosure is going to happen according to the government or the military, because the military is what counts. But it's so I know in maybe the 30s or 40s, some of the presidents were meeting with aliens, but in 1961 was this big one in England. In 1971 there was a big conference in Iran. In 1981, after, I shouldn't just call them by their, anyway, Kate and William, when they got married in England, then over in France, there was a meeting. So when you have one of the G8 meetings, or you think it's just an economic meeting, well, secretly, you're probably having an alien conference in the background, maybe smaller. So, and they've had them numerous times. And then this timeline said that in 2031. So actually, we're getting closer. We'll set the date for disclosure. It's like, well, what good is that? So, what are you going to set it for? 2080? Come on. It's like, so, I am still. My big dream was I want a piece of property where the aliens can land, or that there's a vortex there and they can all just come and visit, and we're going to sit around and have tea and discuss, because I really want to dive into what their cultures are like. And, I'm supposed to, one of my things is I'm supposed to be teaching other aliens about humans. So, I'm not done working with aliens. And I've now evolved is not the right word. What I love talking about now when I give talks is, because many aliens are very spiritual, and many of them understand how connected we all are, whether you're human or not human, and that the universe is this vast, wonderful, amazing place, regardless of what you look like or where you live, and that the universe is abundant and it has everything we need, and and we're all connected. And I just love that concept. And many species, like I said, are spiritual. Many of them have their own fae folk. Many of them have their own sorceresses or witchcraft to help guide them. So it's like, this is not, oh, only people on Earth have fairies and only people on Earth can be witches. No, it's universal. And I love that. And I love talking about that rather than, oh, these nasty aliens over here. And it's like, I love connecting on a positive, spiritual, friendly, we're not all going to be friendly. Not all humans are friendly, but I do want people to understand that there's this really cool connection, and, we can tap into a connection with them if we want. So that's where I'm
Okay.
going.
Yeah. JoAnn, would you like to tell us a little bit about your books?
Yes, the first book is called Midlife Magic, and it's by my former married name, JoAnn Richards. It talks about all my marriages, and at the time, number 7, we were okay. But, it's like, okay, I grew up. Here's my childhood. Here's each marriage. Here's where it went wrong. Here's what I learned. And the chapters about the ex it's like, here's how I met this guy in prison, what it's like to be a prison wife, and then how he introduced me. So now there's chapters on my paranormal experiences, my magical practice, my intuition, and how I protect myself. There's a chapter on fairies and stuff. And it was like, because I changed my life radically when I was in my early 40s. So hence the midlife. And it ends with, I'm still on a path. I don't know where I'm going exactly, but I'm on this path, and I love it. And that I will say openly, that's like the title and the cover were inspired. It's like they just came to me, and it's like, okay, this is what it has to be called. And illustrator, this is what I want. And she did it perfect and added fairies, which was lovely. Book number 2 just came out at the end of June. It's called The Prince Was Wrong, Leaving the Narcissist Behind. And it's by my current, my maiden name there that I go by. Because I unfortunately discovered after 20 years, husband number 7 is a narcissist flat out. He has a lot of great qualities. He's a military hero. I learned a lot of great things from him. But when it comes to, I don't think my needs are being met, it's like, well, too bad, basically. And so the book is all about how I learned he was a narcissist and the different issues we were trying to go through and deal with, and just relationship wise, and also dealing with his house in California, because I didn't own any part of it, but I was taking care of all of it. So we had some major issues going on, but it's like when I started standing up for myself and saying, hey, I want to retire, and you're not getting out of prison anytime soon. How's this going to work? And, I kind of started asserting myself. Yes, you'd think that was strange that I couldn't do that before, but because I'm a proud Leo at the moment, but it wasn't easy to stand up to him, because he either shut you down in a very charming way, or you'd get a stern little lecture, and it was horrible. And when I left, he assumed I was leaving, but I didn't mean, I wasn't planning on divorce when I first moved from California. It was COVID. I couldn't see him anyway. So it's how we navigated the ickiness of the situation, and lots of really mean letters from him, which I kept and I quoted in the book. So that's where all the fodder, my proof, comes from. And then it's like how everything just untangled, and it got nasty. and how easy it was to get a divorce in Oregon, thankfully. And then, things that were just hanging on until, finally, the last financial piece is hopefully about to get resolved. Finally, it's only taken like 4 years since I left for it to get there. And it's also talks about how I'm very healthy emotionally, physically, and, spiritually, and how, again, he was a teacher, but I had to go through that, and it was part of my healing journey, and how I want to help people who are suffering that way. And how, some of the things you can do for yourself to just get, heal and be healthy and happy, and how you can, have a better life. And you don't have to be stuck here, regardless of aliens or fairies. You don't have to be stuck in an icky relationship situation. So hopefully it will just shed some light if people are stuck in really bad relationships. And yeah. So, but again, my motto is you can change your life at any age, 40s or 70, and I'm living proof that you can really make your own best life. So it's all good.
JoAnn, what do you like to do for like a hobby? Like, what do you do to relax? What makes you happy?
Uh, well, I have a cat, but no, I have a cat I adore. I walk a lot. I try to walk every day because that's also my meditation. I take my phone just to record my steps. I'm not on my phone when I'm walking. So I love to get out and get into nature. That's my huge thing. I often knit. I read a lot. My daughter lives 6 blocks away, so I see her several times a week. I see my sister, my family, a few times a year and stuff. So that's it. I'm very, I want to get back into dancing and things like that. But mostly my biggest thing is walking and stuff. So, I have a cruise planned for next year. I went on one last year.
Uh,
But, yeah,
so
those kind of things.
I have to ask. You said you like to read. Do you like sci-fi or do you avoid that?
I did not grow up reading sci-fi. I read a lot of mysteries,
Okay.
a lot of mysteries. But I also have gotten into some other, like, maybe fiction, but they're not mysteries. I've read a lot of World War II era things. I really like to read, how the underground dealt with the World War II stuff. The French Resistance. That's a lot of people write about that. And recently, I read a book about, the story was fictional, but when Hitler was, especially towards the end of the war, they would, hire is not the right word. I don't know if they got paid, but they drafted young women to taste Hitler's food to see, make sure he wasn't getting poisoned. So this book was about a group of girls, and there was one in particular about being tasters for Hitler. So I do like to read historical fiction, and I do like to read other people's memoirs and stuff like that. And one of my favorite empowering books was Untamed by Glennon Doyle, because, she left a long time marriage, and, I think she was Catholic, but I don't know that her husband was physically abusive, but he cheated on her a lot. And, she left, and now she's married to a wonderful woman. And it's how they've blended all the families together, and all the parents co-parent. And it was very empowering for me. So I read a variety of things, but still mostly mysteries.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah.
Well, JoAnn, this has
Yeah.
been a very fascinating hour. The
Thank you.
website is joannfawcett.com. Do you have
Yep.
any social media links that you like to connect with people
I,
on?
sure, I do Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, all under just my name. So
Okay.
you can find me in all those places, and you'll see all both my books in all those places.
Okay, awesome. Well, JoAnn,
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining me. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you for having me. You too.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest
And
of your evening.
you as well. And I'd like to
Thank
thank
you.
everyone for who listens to this episode. If you'd like to learn more about my podcast, you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Just search for A Happy Moment Podcast. And I will see you guys next time. Take care, everybody.
Bye.